know what I do for a living, right? That's right, I'm a firearms instructor. So I guess you could say I teach people to kill for a living. I mean, that sounds like I teach assassins. That kind of sounds cool. But anyway, I've been told by a lot of people that I teach people to murder people. And they don't like what I do for a living. Okay, I understand that. Fortunately, I live in a place where I'm free to do this. So, we have seen in the news lately where the skill that I teach has been put to use, and now there's a court case over it. The question is, was it justified? As you know, or you may not know, here in Florida there's a pretty big court case going on about a man who was shoved to the ground and then shot the man who shoved him. Now, there are a lot of elements to this, and we're going to discuss a few of them today. But what I'm going to give you is my personal opinion based on what I do, the fact that I am a firearms instructor and I do teach concealed carry classes. I'm going to tell you the way the law has been accepted. I'm going to explain the parameters of the situation, and we're going to try and get to a conclusion that is real, that is based on reality, rather than all this emotional nonsense that people are spreading about. Because I don't know any of the people involved, we're going to have to just call them Mr. Shooter and Mr. Shover. So I'm going to show you the video real quick, and you tell me what you think of what happened. So the first thing that people pick out when they see this video is that there's a black man and a white man involved. And every time there's two different people from two different races, the first thing that hits the table is the race card. Look, today we're going to leave the race card out. In fact, we're going to go ahead and discard the race card. I have no desire to get into the question of a race. And to be real, race doesn't play a factor in this situation. It really doesn't. You see, what's at question here is not whether this was racially motivated. It was whether or not this was reasonable self-defense, or if it was manslaughter or murder. These questions have nothing to do with race, and I don't think they have anything to do with anybody's history. Because there's a lot of people in the news talking about how this man, Mr. Shooter, had done this before, had gotten in arguments and had promised to shoot people or threatened to shoot people, and he has fought over similar things in the past. But, well, we can't really use his past in this situation. I mean, if we could, then why wasn't Trayvon Martin's past used in his situation? That is, we all knew, anybody who was reasonable knew, that Trayvon Martin had a pretty rocky history. He was a known fighter, he was known to be a troublemaker, he was known to be a drug user. And none of that was allowed to be talked about in court. So why is it okay with this man, Mr. Shooter, to have his background dragged through court as well? If it's not good for one, it's not good for the other. So let's forget about the background. Let's forget about that happening. So the next thing that comes up is the handicapped parking space. The young lady in this argument was parked in a handicapped parking space. Now, there is some debate over whether or not this handicapped parking space was properly marked. And that's kind of important to the legality of her parking spot. So, if a parking space is only marked with the paint on the ground in Florida, that's not enough. It has to be posted. It has to be on a sign so that everybody can see that it's a handicapped parking space with a car sitting on it. That's the only way she would have gotten a ticket. There has been an argument, and I've never visited that store, so I don't know, but there's been an argument that there was no legal marking of it being a handicapped parking space. So we have to move on from that. Now, I will say this. as somebody who has lived in a wheelchair and somebody who has a hard time getting around, I do feel for Mr. Shooter in his argument with this woman about parking in a handicapped space when the gentleman who went into the store was clearly not handicapped. Now, sometimes it's hard to tell whether they're handicapped or not, but based on the way he threw Mr. Shooter on the ground, he's not handicapped enough to have needed that handicapped spot. And it wasn't the only spot open. There were other spots open at the time. So here's where I am. If you pull up to a gas station and there's one spot open and it's the handicap spot and it's poorly marked and you know it's a handicap spot, which, okay, I'm told, and I don't know for sure so I shouldn't judge, but I'm told that these two have frequented that gas station, so she probably knows it was a handicap spot. If she doesn't, then all's good, I understand. But he did make her aware that it was a handicap spot, and her response wasn't to back away, it was to sit there and argue back. So I digress. If you pull up to a gas station and the only open spot is a handicap spot, okay, I understand. If you're just running in, whatever, that's fine. But that mental thing that people go through where they say, well, I'm just gonna run into the store, so I'll park in the handicap spot. Screw you. You know what? Screw you. Because now I can't park in one of the other spots. I can't. I can't just get my wheelchair out next to you without hitting your car because you're parked over here where I can't get into the handicap spot. I need space for my wheelchair, and those handicap spots are built for that space. If you, just because you feel like it's okay to run into the store, for those of us who can't just run into the store, that is despicable. I mean, you are the lowest piece of crap on the earth. You know that? You really are. Don't use handicap spots if you don't need them. Don't. Okay? It's hard for us. And these are things that we have agreed with, you know, in society to create handicap spots for people like me because I can't use any of the other spots. Now, if all the spots were extra wide and all the spots had ramps leading up to the sidewalk, okay, fine, whatever, pick a spot. But when there's only one spot in that whole parking lot where I can get into my wheelchair and wheel it up that ramp and into a store, why, when you have 1,000 other choices, do you choose the one that I can use? It's annoying. It is. It's despicable. So, okay, you see, I understand why he was angry. I totally get why the dude was angry. I'd have been angry too. So, there's a lot of people who say, well, you know, so what if she broke the law? He should have minded his own business. No! We're society. This, you gotta mind your own business while I break the law, bullshit has got to stop. It has got to stop. Too many people are getting away with too many bad things, and it has become a culture to do things wrong because you know that you're not going to get in trouble unless a cop happens to walk by. This is absurd. Seriously, people, we need to be citizen police. When somebody's breaking the law in front of us, we need to call them out on it. We don't need to be minding our own business while other people are making life harder for other people intentionally or out of selfishness. That's nonsense. Listen, if I see somebody park in a handicapped spot and they're not supposed to be there, I'm gonna tell them. And if they want to argue with me about it, they're gonna argue with me about it. But I am going to tell them they are wrong. They're in the wrong place. They have no business being there. Now, if they belong there and they just don't have their dealio, okay, whatever. But clearly this isn't the case in this situation. So don't argue this he should have minded his own business nonsense. Otherwise, you are not a part of society and you do not belong in this society. It's embarrassing, son. Get over it. So now you have to look at the argument itself. Here's a man who was armed, you know, for his self-defense, we can assume, because that's why people legally carry. He was carrying legally, right? So he caught her doing something wrong. See? Whether it's a crime or not is arguable, but she was clearly doing something at least immoral. And he called her out on it. She argued with him. Is he doing anything wrong? No. Is she? Yes. Okay, so 1 point for them for doing something wrong. Now, they get in the argument. This man is standing, what, 5 feet away, 6 feet away, never approached the car, never pulled his gun on her, never made I don't know what was said, but words, remember that thing when you were a kid? Sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt me. Exactly. See, nothing had been done. The man was not even approaching the vehicle. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was doing the right thing by telling her not to park in the handicapped spot. So, with the argument, the only person who had done anything wrong is the woman in the car. So the next thing that happens is the shove. So far it's, we're doing wrongdoing. 1 point her, 0 points the shooter. So now the shover comes out, marches across the parking lot basically, and shoves him, and I don't mean kind of nudges him to the ground. He full on threw this old guy like he was a bag of potato chips. Just tossed him, slammed him to the ground. Is that okay? Is it okay to just go up and slam people to the ground? How about I find a really big friend who could come grab you and throw you on the ground? How's that, huh? Is that okay? Would you press charges? I guarantee you most of the people who are saying, oh, it was just a shove, would be pressing charges if they had just been thrown to the ground for doing the right thing. Now we have two things. The guy who shoved was illegally shoving somebody. That is a criminal offense. And she was parked wrongly or illegally, depending on the situation, which is also a criminal offense, be it just a ticket. So as it is, we have 2 points for the shover, 0 points for the shooter, right? So at this point, everything that has been done wrong by the people who are being called the victims. So, we move on. What you may not know is in the state of Florida, brandishing a weapon is unlawful. It is a felony. All of you who say, well, he should have just pointed the gun at him and told him to stop, that would have been criminal. He would have gone to jail for 20 years, and at his age, that could have been the rest of his life. You can't do that. Not in Florida. You're not allowed to pull a gun and point it at people and change their behavior with the gun. Once that gun comes out, you have to shoot. So you have to wait until your life is in jeopardy before you even reach for the gun. Which brings up the next step. The question that comes next is, did he brandish that gun and fire it lawfully? Did he feel like his life was in jeopardy, or he was in jeopardy of serious injury? Serious injury. If somebody had thrown me to the ground like that, in my physical condition, and I'm about the same age as Mr. Shooter, my life would have been in serious danger. Because of my colostomy, because of my nervous disorder, because of my other problems that I don't want to talk about, if somebody threw me to the ground, my life would be in danger. And they could, at minimum, seriously hurt me. I can't fight back. I can't get into a fight. Things could go real wrong real quick if I get into a fight. So as somebody who carries a gun myself, if I get thrown to the ground, what if they knock me out? What if I have a seizure? What if one of these things that happens to me every day anyway, what if I'm having a seizure and this guy, can take my gun from me and kill me? That's a pretty serious concern. It's a real concern. Clearly, this dude is not, he has no compunctions against running around throwing people out of anger when it's nothing but an argument over something that he was doing wrong. So, we have to consider this. This is an old dude being thrown down by a very big guy relative to him. A guy who, in a fair fight, wouldn't be a fair fight. It would be a pummeling. And that does matter. Let's change the scenario. Let's say that it was a 6'6" man who came out and threw a 5-foot female across the pavement. Would you even be questioning whether or not this was a legitimate shooting? Of course you wouldn't. And, I again am discarding the race card, but I will say this. The people who would question this now wouldn't be questioning it if it were a white man being shot by a small black girl. They would say, oh, well, she was in danger. It was, clear. So, yes, there's a racial component to it, but it's the racists who are bringing the racial component to this discussion. Finally, watching the video, as you see, the shover kept approaching after he shoved the shooter. Okay? The shooter was on the ground, the shover was pulling his pants up and still bowing up and approaching him as if to do more harm, as if to make sure he stayed down, when the shooter reached for his gun. And until the shover saw him reach for the gun, the shover kept moving forward. It wasn't until he realized he had screwed up that he changed his mind. Now, we're going back to the brandishing law, to the fact that it's not okay to shove somebody, and it's not okay to point a gun at somebody. If in the short, micro bit of a time where Mr. Shooter reaches for his gun, he reaches for that gun, and Mr. Shover's like, oh, well, maybe I won't beat his ass. Maybe I won't kill him. It's too late. When you shoved him to the ground and you kept moving forward, you made him to decide to shoot you. You left him with no choice but to shoot you. So yeah, by doing that, he put himself in that situation. Mr. Shover put himself in a bad situation. If there's anything that can be learned from this, it's that you don't go around shoving people, because you don't know what's going to happen when you do. You don't know who you're shoving or what they're capable of. This, oh, I'll just beat his ass mentality has got to stop. It's not okay to go around beating people's ass because you don't like that they called you out for doing something wrong. That's not acceptable. So, I'm leaning on that because it's an important thing. If it were just an argument, if the man had come up and said, oh, you're black and I don't like you, so I'm going to fight with you, I'm going to argue with you, and, go ahead and bring your man out, I'll kick his ass too. It's not right. It still wouldn't be right, but there would be a different dynamic to this discussion. But because the shover was the one who was in the wrong twice, the shooter did what he was legally allowed to do by state law to defend himself. So yes, in this situation, as presented, as we see what happened, I have no choice but to come down on the side of the shooter. It is a tragedy. It is awful. I feel horrible for both families, because both families are being dragged through something that is just, it's so sad. It's so sad. The loss of life, for both sides. I mean, the physical loss of life for one, and then just, a lifetime of what the shooter is going to have to go through, whether he goes to jail or not. His life is destroyed. Everything about his life has just completely changed. So, it's a tragedy on both sides. And it sucks, but the truth is, when somebody throws you to the ground and keeps approaching, you pull a gun out to shoot them. In that instant, between the time you're pulling it out and the time you shoot them, they decide they screwed up. It's too late. Once you throw yourself off the top of the building and you realize you've gotten to the ground, it's too late to decide to turn around. By shoving him on the ground and continuing to approach him, he jumped off that building. The little time that it took him to fall from there to being shot is irrelevant. What he did in that time, changing his mind, was irrelevant. He already created the situation. It's sad, but it's true. Look, I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback from this, and I know there's a lot of people who are going to be so deeply emotionally enthralled in this that they're not even going to want to look at the real, indisputable facts. And I understand. Yeah, maybe this guy is a dirtbag. I don't know him. Maybe either one of them is a dirtbag. I don't know either one of them. I can't judge them based on what the news says because I've been in part of the news. I know how they treat people. They choose sides and they make the guy they want to be bad the bad guy. So you might be buying into a media story that's just not true. So, yeah, I feel for both of them. It's a horrible situation. But one life has already been lost. Do we need to take another? Do we need, out of anger and out of hurt, do we need to take another life? Do we need to destroy the life of Mr. Shooter in light of the fact that he did what was expected by law? He hadn't done anything wrong, and by shooting this man, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was protecting his life. That's not arguable. You can argue, but your argument will be completely unsubstantiated. There's just no reasonable argument that he didn't have a legal right to shoot. So, enough of that. I hope you got something out of this. I hope you've learned something out of this. I hope you don't hate me for it, but I gotta be honest with you. It's important to me to tell the truth, not to tell what people want to hear. So wherever you fall on this, we may disagree, but I'm telling you from my perspective what I see as an instructor as a legitimate shooting. I always teach my students that if there's any way not to shoot, if there's anything you can do to keep from going through what this man's doing, then do it. Run away, carry pepper spray, do whatever you can to not have to shoot somebody. But when you have to, and that instant comes, it's hard for us to look at this video and imagine what this man was going through when, you know, this hulking individual was approaching him and threw him across the parking lot. I mean, I can kind of imagine because I've been there, but it's still, I teach my students not to shoot unless it's, you know, you're already bleeding, you're already in serious danger. And I hope that this lesson for both sides, the lesson for one is don't go around shoving people. The lesson for two is don't shoot. Don't. If you can get away with not shooting, don't, because you are watching what happens when you have to make that split-second decision and everybody disagrees with you. So don't. If you can do this without shooting, do not shoot. Please. I hope you like my videos, guys. Thanks a lot for your patience. Thanks for sitting through this with me. I want you to hit that subscribe button. I want you to hit like. I want you to be my friend. Be my friend. Just be my friend. And hey, man, you guys take care. We're going to see how this turns out in the news. Pretty soon we should have an answer. One way or the other. Who knows? I don't make the rules. So, take care, guys.